Let's jump back to our program and try to implement some authorization to our Rocket APIs. To do so, we're gonna make use of this concept of request guards that Rocket has. But before starting, let's see what we want to accomplish. Let's say, for example, for the getRustaceans route, we want to only make it accessible only if this header is passed from the caller. So right now we have something like this. It works, all good, we have the JSON returned, but we want to make this JSON accessible only if someone specifies this authorization header and then includes the right credentials with this header value, basically. Our base 64 encoded string copy-pasted by the Wikipedia example with Aladdin and Open Sesame. So right now this header is of course being ignored, doesn't matter if we pass it or not. But yeah, in the end we want our route to only respond if this header exists. If it doesn't exist, then we should give an HTTP error of 401 unauthorized. Okay, so let's, for the starters, let's create a new Rust struct. Let's call it basic auth. This will contain the username and the password, the credentials. So for basic auth header, whatever are the user, whatever the visitor, or whatever the requester passed down to us. Both of them will be strings, since we don't really know their size during compile time. And then we're gonna make both of them public in case some route needs to access them and somehow use them. Alright, now that we have the struct, we also need some ways to basically parse this thing and then create the struct with username and password. To do so, we will implement some factory methods. Factory methods are like quite frequent thing we do in Rust world. You will find them all around the place, creating some structs with those factory methods. There we go. I have two factory methods implemented for you. And for the authorization header, more or less, we want to somehow pass the header in this factory method, and then this factory method to return us this struct, basically. So from authorization header is the first factory method, which will accept the header value. The header value, remember, header value is the basic part, the basic something part you see here. This is the value of the header. This is the key of the header. So to our factory function here, we will pass the value of the header. And then we will try to split this header by white space. Again, remember, we have white space in between here, the credentials and the type authorization. So we will split this header value by white space and try to collect it into a vector. If we have exactly two elements, then all good, otherwise we will return none. If the first element of the vector is not basic, again we will return none, because we only support the basic authorization for now, nothing else. So if we did have basic, then the second element of the array is going to be most likely a base 64 encoded value, which we will pass it down to this factory function now. And yeah, we will try to decode this base 64 encoded string. And in order to do so, we will use this base 64 crate. This is an external crate, which we will also specify as a dependency here, base 64. and then the version will be 0.20. So this create will give us this nice function over there, which accepts base64 encoded string. It will decode it and return a result to us. We will try to convert this result to an option with this OK function here. And then afterwards, we will use this question mark up here. This question mark basically tells Rust to only continue to the next line of the program only if this OK returns some value. If we have none, it will basically return here. It will return the none and stop executing the rest of the function. It is a nice, cool concept which saves us some lines of code. So we don't need to check anything in a new line. Below, we are sure that we have a decoded string now, which is basically a UTF-8 characters. We are gonna try to create a string from these UTF-8 characters, because remember, basic auth struct expects username and password to be strings. So we will do the same trick with OK here, since from UTF-8 also returns a result. We'll try to convert the result to an option. If it works, we will move on down here with splitting the string, with splitting by the colon. Remember, we have username and password separated by a colon in the base64 decoded value. Since we decoded it successfully, now most likely we have username and password pair, and we try to collect them into a vector. Again, we expect the vector to be exactly the size of 2, since we have username and password. If some of them are missing, then credentials are not valid, so we will return none here. In the case we have exactly 2 elements in here, we are now sure that the first element is username and the second element is the password. And we will convert those into strings and give them to basic auth, create a basic auth struct with them, wrap this basic auth struct into sum, and return it to the caller. Okay, now we have our factory methods ready, we have our struct, but how do we wire up this struct to our endpoints? How do we make an endpoint make use of this struct? Well, the way to do so is by using this Rocket concept of request guards. Request guards are basically functions that we run to whatever endpoint requests them, and these guards will act on the request object. So we have an incoming request. The endpoint that serves this request requests a guard to run first, and then the guard will check the request and it will return either success or failure. In case of success, Rocket will move on with calling the endpoint. Otherwise, if we have failure, then the Rocket will return whatever the guard returned to it. So the way to do this for basic auth is to implement this trait. Sorry, not this one, but this one here. We have from request trait. It is a Rocket async trait, as we specify up here in the attribute, and we will implement it for basic auth. The way to implement it is by basically coding the from request function. This from request function will accept the request object from Rocket, and it will return an outcome. This outcome is going to be either success or failure. In case of failure, remember, we return an unauthorized HTTP status code. Otherwise, in case of success, we will return a basic auth struct. And let's see how we do this. First of all, we're gonna retrieve the headers from the request, and then from the headers we're gonna try retrieve the authorization header. If the authorization header is there, we will try to parse it using the from authorization header factory method up here, remember, and in here we will pass the header value, because this function, this get1 function, will return the header value already. If decoding the header goes well, then we have basic auth struct here already, so our guard will return outcome success with this basic auth struct. Now I will go on and import these missing structs. Most of them are in the Rocket request module. We have from request trait, the request object itself, where we will retrieve the headers from, and then also the outcome that our guard will return. Nice, and now we just have the status missing. We're gonna import it from Rocket HTTP module. Now all good. You can see here that unauthorized status is code 401, like we wanted. And then also checking the documentation for get1, it will return the first value, so it will return the header value here. It will not return the header, the entire header, it will just return the value. Alright, so now we are good to go and basically use our request guard. And the way to do so is by going to the endpoint that we want to basically protect with our guard, and then pass it as an argument to it. So for example, for the getRastassians, we want to lock this endpoint only to requests that contain this header, so our basic auth guard. And the way to do so is by specifying a new argument to our function, which will be type hinted with our basic auth struct. Now Rocket knows that whenever it calls our function, our endpoint function, to first of all try to find the basic auth argument to provide, it knows that there is a guard that is named exactly like this, so it will call this from request method, and then if everything goes well, it will give this basic auth struct into our endpoint. Of course, here we will not use it for now. Our endpoint still has this dummy hard-coded logic, so I will prefix it with an underscore, so the compiler does not complain anymore. And then we are good to go and try to test it. I will recompile the app. So our new guard is loaded, and then there is no difference here in the metadata, no indications for the guard. So let's go and try to call the endpoint. First of all, I will try to call it without the header. The authorization header is missing now, and there we go. Rocket will respond with 401, unauthorized, basically the status code that we specified here. Of course, the error page is ugly, but we will fix it later. Now let's try to call the endpoint with the authorization header, and yeah, now it works. Because our header is correctly parsed. Let's see what happens if we have some kind of, I don't know, missing the credentials, for example. Exactly, we receive again the 401 error. Whatever we do, or maybe if we specify another method of authorization, for example the barrier, then we have again 401. This will only work, our endpoint will only work now with this basic header and nothing else. Of course, we can further lock it down to specific credentials, but yeah, we will do this later.